Welcome to our weekly Church on the Rock podcast. For more information, visit us at churchak.org, download our Church on the Rock AK app, or like us on our Facebook page. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy our weekly podcast.
Man, we're just getting started, just so you know. If you've been to Church on the Rock before for an Easter service, it's a party. And we are prepared to celebrate what God is going to do today and what happened 2,000 years ago in the resurrection of Jesus. But before we jump in, I want to preface what I'm about to say with a couple of things. The first thing is this. My mom, I hope she's watching because I only wore a tie today for her. Just wanted to know I was dressing up for Easter. And if you don't know if you know this, if you wear a tie, then a jean jacket actually becomes a sport coat. So, there you go. Also, my mom is a pediatric nurse practitioner. She worked for the health department for most of my life growing up, and I can remember specifically back in the 80s, which wasn't that long ago, so we're clear. My mom first heard about the diagnoses for ADHD. Well, it was ADD originally, and then they discovered me, and they were like, well, we got to add in the hyper piece. So it became ADHD. But you need to know that. My sister works in medical research. So I say all that to just let you know, I am not opposed to medication, counseling, all those sorts of things. In fact, I myself take Adderall for ADHD, and you should be really, really, what was that? Grateful for that. And also, apparently, because I'm now old, I'm on a low dosage of a blood pressure medication. Whatever. But all of that to just let you know that I'm not necessarily opposed to diagnoses. But the truth is that we live in a world that loves to diagnose everything as an illness or sickness. And effectively, what we've done over time is we've excused what the scriptures would actually describe as sinful brokenness. We've excused it as mental illness. And don't get me wrong, there are both. But I've noticed over time that what we've been told more and more, with more and more frequency, is that the very best we can hope for is a diagnosis for our dysphoria, or that we could cope with our cravings, or that we can just medicate the mania, or that we only get temporary escape from persistent problems. I don't know about you, but I really hope for more than that. But I've noticed a key difference between the things that I actually take medication for and my own sinful desires. And the difference between my sinful desires and illnesses is this: I never feel guilty about my ADHD. Now, my mom probably felt embarrassed a lot over my job, but I never feel guilty about that. And yet there are these other things in my life that I could excuse away, I could get a diagnosis for, but at a very core level, I feel this pervasive sense of guilt over them. And I think maybe at your core, too, there's that persistent, nagging, gnawing sense of guilt, and we just can't seem to shake it. And so what we're told is this, that voice is actually the voice of a prudish, outdated, antiquated, hyper-religious culture that you've been exposed to. And that if you could just get away from them, then you could get away from it. And so we try really hard. At least I tried really hard. We run and we resist and we blame and we bash, and it never seems to be enough. And the truth is, over time, it's just exhausting trying to figure out who to blame next. It really is. And it only brings temporary relief to that sense that I have that something is broken. What we discover over time, if we're honest, and to be honest, if we give it enough time, because there are temporary reprieves for sure. And what we discover, though, over time, if we're honest, is that it isn't actually from them, it's something that's in us. And to be more specific, it isn't from them, but it's actually a him that creates that feeling. It's a Father. It's your Creator. And it's a compelling and convicting voice, and it's from a compassionate and loving Father. In fact, that sense of guilt or shame is actually intended to drive you to love. I found myself at 19 years old having run for a really long time from that nagging sense before I got captured. The truth is that He is offering you more than a diagnosis. What He's offering you and I is deliverance, which is what we long for at the deepest parts of who we are. And hope is what you're being handed. Hope is what is extended in the hands extended at the cross. But hope can be a scary thing. Maybe you came into this room today thinking, nope, I'm going to show up because it's the right thing to do, because my family wants me to go, because it's Easter and you're supposed to show up on Easter and Christmas. That's why we're Creasters. But I'm going today out of obligation or duty or habit or tradition. But I ain't about to hope again. I did that once and it didn't work out so well. And can I just tell you, it's worth daring to hope again. In fact, I would challenge you to just crack the door of hope open a little bit, because in the next few moments, you're going to hear several stories of transformation, like no small deal, radical life change kind of transformation. And could you just crack the door open a little bit to see if hope might seep in as you listen to Katie's story?
I had pretty much given up on life. I was in a pit of despair, depression, hopelessness. I had been a meth and heroin addict for 10 years, and I had reconciled to the fact that life was not going to be any good without drugs. And I had tried to get sober a couple of times, but even after those few times, I didn't think life was going to be any good without drugs. And so sobriety wasn't an option for me. I was prepared to do drugs the rest of my life. That was going to be the only purpose and happiness that I had. So I found myself once again out of money, homeless, out of anybody to help. I ended up at my parents' house and ended up getting sick at their house, and they weren't going to let me stay there, but they let me stay long enough to get past the sickness, and then it was off to rehab after that. And I still really wasn't wanting to change at that point, but I had no other options. But God was behind it. He knew what He was doing, and He was leading me into a place of just total surrender. Even when I got to rehab, I was still fighting it the whole way. But I remember praying with my parents before I went there. And I was still in this mindset that I don't want to give up drugs. I don't want to do life without drugs. But there was a small part of me that wanted to not want that kind of life anymore, that wanted out. And my mom was praying with me, and she just asked me to at least give that part to God. It was just a tiny little thing. and I prayed with her and gave that part to God. And I think that was kind of the moment that he started working and doing something. So today, God has completely delivered me from the depression, from the despair, from the hopelessness. I have life and hope that I honestly never thought was possible. I mean, the fact that I'm enjoying life now, the fact that I don't want drugs, that I don't want to go back to that life is just an absolute miracle in itself, because, like I said, I was reconciled to the fact that I was going to want drugs whether I was sober or not. And God has done so much, and he's delivered me from so much, and now he's using me. I'm an intern at Sarah's house now, and God's using me to help other people find freedom and to help figure out what it is that's holding them back. And I think he's really using me as a leader there. And I've got hope in life now, and it's amazing. It's like God's giving me a new start and giving me life that I thought that I would never have. My name is Katie, and this is my testimony.
Here's what you need to know. These stories aren't ones we found on the internet. These are our community. And in fact, I can't tell you how many times we prayed with Katie's mom during the past 7-10 years that God would do what seemed to be absolutely impossible, that he would perform a miracle. But did you hear it in her story? I reconciled to the fact that life wasn't going to be any good without drugs. Sobriety wasn't an option for me. You hear it, right? The hopelessness, the optionlessness, the powerlessness that she felt. And I love it. She says, but there was just this small part of me that wanted to. And my mom said to me, would you just give that small part to Jesus? And deliverance, like real deliverance, was the result. You know what I love about this image that you're going to see from the Sistine Chapel? It's a picture of God creating. I know, the fig leaf was not Michelangelo, that was me. You're welcome, parents. And Adam, you're welcome too. It's called the creation of Adam, or God and Adam. I'd never really noticed it before. I'd seen the picture dozens of times, images on the internet or in movies or whatever it was. But somebody pointed out to me several years ago that in the image, God is fully extended. Like it almost appears as though he's being held back a little bit by the weird and creepy-looking angelic beings. I don't know why we make them chubby little children, but we did for a while. And so look at it a little bit closer, and you can see that God is fully extended. And then Adam is just kind of like, meh. Like literally, let's just go back to the first one for a second. Literally, all he would have to do, he wouldn't even have to take his elbow off of his knee. He just has to go like this. And they're connected. But as I've looked at this image, I've come to the conclusion that I'm just like that. It represents this apathy in the human condition, this unwillingness, this half-hearted effort to reach God. But what you need to know, and what's most important in the image, is that God has fully extended himself. And when you look at this image, there's just the little gap between the finger of God and the finger of man. And what you need to know is the cross filled that gap. that distance, that separation that actually existed from the Garden of Eden all the way to the hill of the cross, that distance was spanned, however big or small, by the cross of Christ. In his effort, not mine. What Easter celebrates is the truth that the cross filled the gap. And truth is a funny thing. From God's perspective, truth is actually more like a declaration of reality. From God's perspective, truth is a declaration of what the world is actually like, not a claim of exclusivity. God doesn't have an ego that needs to be boosted up, and so he wants you to think he's the best. And so when Jesus makes a statement like, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he's not being pompous or arrogant. He's just declaring to you and I what is true. Our unwillingness to believe that he is actually that is the problem, not whether it is actually that. From God's perspective, truth is more like the laws of nature than personal preferences. When it comes to the law of gravity, I don't care what you believe, if you jump off of a 3-story building, chances are really high that you're not going to survive, and they are certain that you're going to hit the ground at a high rate of speed. Right? There's no way. It's just, and so for me to say to you, the only way to avoid injury in this moment is not to jump off of the building, and you to say, well, that's your truth, would be ridiculous. But from God's perspective, it is equally ridiculous to resist his declaration of reality. And the fact is that truth often places limits on us, but in so doing, it produces and preserves life for us. That's always been the intention of God. And I've noticed over the years that truth also resonates. Like when you hear it, you can feel it in your bones. Sometimes it resonates when we're reasoned with, when we're addressed with logic and rationality. I can just tell you in my own journey over the years, the more I've dug into, does Christianity, the claims of Christianity, make the most sense with the world that I find myself in? Over and over and over and over again, I come to the absolute conclusion that it does. My mind has been thoroughly convinced that the claims of Christianity actually make the most sense with the world that you and I find ourselves in, the observable world. But often it rings true in people's stories. You hear their description and something about it just resonates with you. It's kind of like the magic singing wine glass. You've done this, right? Hear it? You should do it sometime when you have little kids. You should do it at the table, and then they will proceed to try for the rest of the time while you're at the restaurant, and you will be cleaning up water endlessly. You know why? Because there's a certain set of ingredients that must be present for it to work. In fact, even if it's on the wrong kind of surface, if the surface is too bumpy, you won't get the resonation from the glass. If there's not water in it, you won't get it. If you don't have water on your finger, you won't get it. But when you're a skilled master like me, who practiced for hours last night, because I was like, this can't go wrong. My girls love this deal, but it's amazing. If it's the wrong kind of glass, it won't work. But when all the right ingredients are there, you get this reverberation, this resonance that happens. It's like, ooh, and you can add all kinds of different levels of water, and you can put it on YouTube, and you'll be famous. I mean, like, but stories are kind of like that. Truth is like that. Because truth mixed with just a few of the wrong ingredients doesn't resonate in the same way, but when all the ingredients are there, you can hear it, you can feel it deep in your bones. I love hearing stories of discovery. People who had tried in their own effort. They were successful in their own right. They were nurses and doctors. They were high up in military rank. They seemed to have everything that you could possibly want in life. And they had made commitments to not be like the people before them were, and yet there was something missing. And then they discover what it was. And maybe you can feel it as you listen to a small part of my friend's story, Landon and Haley Chapman.
We met in 2007. We were both bringing a lot of baggage to the table. We had already both been in a failed marriage and gone through divorces.
Neither of us had faith, basically, of our own. We just were independent people, and he was riding on his parents' faith, and I had God in an emergency use only box. I couldn't cope with life the way it was, so I began self-medicating, and I had sworn I wouldn't follow the generations before me, but I did. And I knew that I needed help, and I was praying for God to help me be able to tell Landon where I was at so that I wouldn't wind up in prison or dead.
I could tell something was up, but I could never really put my finger on what it was.
And then one day I accidentally exposed it to Landon, which was super painful, but it was definitely an answer to prayer.
Yeah, I felt a lot of emotions. I was angry, mad, scared, and embarrassed probably.
We knew that only Jesus could save our marriage, and so we started coming to Fresh Start, and we started coming to marriage group, trying to honor our vows and be able to be a happy two-parent home for our children.
Today, well, if you would have told us like 4 years ago that we would be here today, we probably would have laughed at you. But Haley gets to, she serves at Fresh Start, which is really the ministry that saved us, but she gets to give back and show other people the path to freedom.
I feel like we didn't have a quick overnight fix, that we had to be intentional, and that we're still learning today, but we're committed to pursuing our own relationships with the Lord, which I feel like brings us closer together, and we just have a lot of grace and love for each other, and we're able to display that to our kids and anybody else who's watching.
My name is Landon.
My name is Haley. This is our testimony.
Oh, man. Here's what you need to know. I know Landon and Haley really well. In fact, I go over to Landon's house typically on Wednesdays with a small group of guys for discipleship, and they said it in their story, right? Hey, it hasn't been an easy road, but they have been transformed by the power of Christ. Here's what's so frustrating about freedom. You don't simply just possess it. You actually have to pursue it. While it may be a free gift that is extended to you and I, that's given to you and I, although it's been freely offered, it can also be carelessly forfeited. That's why pastors are often so apprehensive about telling other people's stories, is because, well, what if they relapse? What if they fail? What if they don't work out? And the reality is that doesn't mean that Jesus did not bring transformation into their life, because the frustrating thing about freedom is that you actually have to pursue it. You can't just simply possess it once and for all. What this week, the Passion Week, Holy Week, what it really represents and what we celebrate is our freedom that was purchased at the cross. This is a historical fact. It's a finished reality. And if you were here at the Good Friday service, that means you're a good person. And I'm just so totally kidding. If you were here at the Good Friday service, though, and you could go back and listen to it, you heard me describe what happened at the cross. And when Jesus says these words, "It is finished," that's exactly what Jesus means. He is not talking about his life. He's not talking about his ministry with his disciples. He's talking about full and final payment for sin has been made. All sin for all time has already been covered by the blood. That is a historical reality. And because of that event, freedom and forgiveness has been extended to every single one of us. In fact, Jesus, speaking of his death on the cross, says, "If I'm lifted up, I will draw all people to myself." What that means is there is a gravitational pull from the message of the cross on the life of every human you know, every human on the planet, no matter how rebellious, how resistant they are. Jesus has guaranteed that the message of the cross has initiated a gravitational pull towards him. But what today represents, because I get asked this question often, if it was finished at the cross, then what's the big deal about the resurrection? And what today, Easter Sunday, the resurrection of Jesus represents is this: he didn't simply hand you and I the keys to our freedom and ride off into the sunset to never be seen again. By his death, he bought our freedom. But it is because he's alive and that he is actively fighting for you and I and for our freedom now. He didn't just take care of it back there and say, "Here it is, it's a gift to you, but you're on your own." What the resurrection represents is that we have a living Savior who is currently and actively fighting for your freedom right now, right here in this day, tomorrow, in that day, and in the next day, and in the next day, and in the next day, because he's a risen Savior. He's alive. He not only took our place way back then, but he lives and he is pleading our case right now, today. That's why in Hebrews it's described as so critical that you understand that Jesus is the high priest. We don't need another high priest. You don't need someone to go confess to. You don't need a high priest to make sacrifices. Jesus was the final sacrifice, but he's also the eternal high priest. Because he's not dead, he can make intercession for you and I today before the Father. Now, in case you think, "Well, Pastor, you just don't know me. I'm too far gone." Maybe you haven't been listening to the stories. "You don't know me. I'm too far gone." Or Jesus wouldn't be still fighting for me because I've said no to him so many times. I failed him so many times. And what you need to hear is Chloe's story. But you need to know a couple of things first before you hear her story. And here's what you need to know. Chloe is the daughter of one of my best friends. Someone who'd been in ministry for years. She was part of our worship teams. She was one of our leaders here at Church on the Rock. She grew up in the church. She loved Jesus. And yet, she found herself in need of a Savior who had resurrection power in the present to come to her rescue. Listen to Chloe's story.
I was homeless, living in trap houses, and I had nothing. My ex got my car impounded in a high-speed chase with the cops, and I lost everything that I owned. I made myself really alone because all my friends stole from me, and because of addiction, I lost everything to drugs. I was really sick in September of 2019. I couldn't sit my own head up. I couldn't get up to use the bathroom. I couldn't move on my own. My boyfriend at the time had to basically feed me and let me drink water and all that. I couldn't do it on my own. I was in the worst pain I've ever been in my life, and he refused to take me to the hospital. Days went by, and my neighbor, who was also an addict, came and wanted to see what was going on, and she was like, "She's really sick, you need to take her to the hospital right now," and took me to the hospital. She stayed with me until my parents got there, and I found out that I was dying. I had endocarditis in my heart. And hundreds of abscess in my lungs, and the worst case of MRSA that the doctors had seen. They told me I was gonna die. And I ended up being in the hospital for 2 months, and in the ICU for almost 2 weeks in intubation. So I was basically in a coma. And they told everyone to come say goodbye to me. When I woke up from intubation, and it was kind of cool, the doctors had, and the nurses wrote in a notebook every day that I was intubated, and just reading that and seeing that I really should have died. And when I was in intubation, they were letting many people in at a time because they were coming to say goodbye to me pretty much. And they were all in there constantly praying over me. And I had pretty much the whole church praying over me, which was really cool. But waking up and reading that and realizing that the only reason that I was still alive was because there's a God who loves me. And that I still had things to do. That changed everything for me. On Easter, I will have 18 months clean, which is all him, not me, because I couldn't do it on my own. I have my dream job that I've wanted to do since I was in middle school, and I am very involved in recovery, and in my recovery program I go to NA every night, and I get to share with people my story and what God's done in me, and it's pretty cool. My name is Chloe, and this is my testimony.
Church, would you stand to your feet with me? Listen, my son, Caleb, shot each of these videos, and he had the same response you might be having right now. Just like every time I hear Chloe's story and Landon and Haley's story and Katie's story, I'm brought to tears. I had to watch them like 15 times just so I could get through the next part of the service without being a blubbering mess in front of all of you. But it's the reality. No matter what your situation is, no matter how desperate it seems, we're all in the same situation. And my testimony is that I was brought from death to life forever because of Christ. And it wasn't just that moment, but I have a risen Savior who is fighting for me today, now, right here, no matter what comes my way. No matter how much I seem to fail in front of you, He's still on my side. And you gotta know, that feeling you have of hope that you're terrified to let well up in your heart again, He wants you to give it to Him. So we're going to lift our voices right now in a song of acknowledgement, of worship, of declaration. And when we're done singing this song, you and I are going to have a quick conversation about what it looks like to trust Jesus with my life. Are you ready? Okay, good. Both of you are. Let's sing, worship team. Over the course of today, between our Palmer campus and here, we've already got 60 people who have said, I want to step into the waters of baptism. Now listen, here's what you got to know about baptism. It doesn't save you. I know, crazy, but the thief on the cross didn't get baptized. But here's what it does. It's a first step in obedience to Jesus, and it's a public declaration of an internal transformation that is already taking place. In fact, in third service today, 2 of my girls came to me on Good Friday and they said, I want to get baptized on Sunday. And I said, bring it on, right? Like, they're ready to make that public declaration. Here's really what baptism is saying. I don't care who knows. I'm on Team Jesus. So come stand right over here with me, right up front. Come on over. And if you don't, this is not good. I'm already losing my voice in first service. Good choice coming to this one. If you haven't been told already, here in a few moments, make sure you sign your name on the wall of the baptismal tank over there, because that is our wall of remembrance. Scoot on in here. I want you to look at me for just a moment. Listen, I know some of your stories. I don't know all of your stories, but if you knew the stories, just the ones I know of the people who are here, you would be a hot mess right now, because Jesus is doing a new thing in your life. And this is a beginning. This is a moment, a new beginning. And I want to encourage you, run hard forward. Find community. Get involved with others. Let people into your life. I won't keep you much longer because you'll get hypothermia. But listen, church, we're going to celebrate. And the scriptures say that when someone comes into a relationship with Christ, all of the angels in heaven erupt in praise and celebration. And that means whether you made the decision just now or you made it years ago and got baptized now, heaven is celebrating the decision that you've made. And we want to celebrate with you. But the best we got are balloons. They do have latex in them. So church, would you give it up for the work that the Lord has done in these lives today?
Thank you for listening. For more of our podcasts and to discover how you can connect, visit us at churchak.org or download our Church on the Rock AK app from either iTunes or Google Play.